Well, good afternoon, everyone. What a pleasure to be together. This room, if you're wondering, this room dates from the 1930s. The Interstate Commerce Commission had this building, so the map in this room and the other were, I think, major transportation routes from what are now, 80 years ago. And EPA has the honor of being the steward of this treasure these years later. So we're so delighted to welcome you into this room and for this extremely important purpose, and both a joyful and a challenging day, right? Joyful because there's considerable amount to celebrate, challenging because there's so much left to do. So as we begin, let me take a few minutes. I'm Barry Breen. I'm the Acting Assistant Administrator for the Office of Land and Emergency Management. Let me take a few minutes to preview what you can expect as we make the most of this time together today. We'll first, in just a moment, have remarks from Acting Administrator Andrew Wheeler. He'll welcome you and frame the challenges and the opportunities before us for action. Then we will recognize the signing of the America Recycles Day pledge. Many, many people have signed it, and we're looking forward to more across the country taking the step that a number of people have taken today. Then we'll, as well, sign a memorandum of understanding on behalf of EPA regarding the Vehicle Mercury Switch Recovery Program. More on that in a minute, and there'll be an opportunity for a photo with that. And then after Administrator Wheeler concludes his remarks, we'll move to a facilitated dialogue among all the invited participants about how we can move forward in the opportunities that lie before us. We've made a lot of progress, but there's so much more to do. And then I'll close it out before 4 o'clock, which is when we have the room until. I'll close it out trying to frame some of what we've heard today and what we can expect in the months to come. So now I have the privilege of welcoming Acting Administrator of the U.S. EPA, Andrew Wheeler. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you. And thank you, Barry, for the introduction, and thank you for the hard work that you and your team have put into today's event. And actually, if I could just ask all of the EPA employees to stand for a minute, because they deserve a lot of recognition for putting this together. Thank you. Thank you. You and your team put this event together from scratch. Nothing, including this speech, has been recycled. But before I begin, I'd like to say a brief word about Don Clay, who passed away last week. Don was a dedicated public servant and friend. He served in a variety of roles at EPA, including as the Assistant Administrator of the Office of Solid Waste and Emergency Response, which is now OLEM. Don's integrity, honesty, and commitment to the protection of human health and the environment were recognized by all. He also served as a mentor and a role model for many young employees during his tenure at EPA. I often turned to Don for advice ever since I met him in the early 90s. We are grateful for Don, and the EPA family offers its condolences to his wife, Joan, his children, and the rest of his family and friends. So thank you all for joining us for the America Recycles Day Summit. We are gathered here today to advance solutions to today's recycling challenges. At the end of my remarks, I will also be signing a new memorandum of understanding that will revitalize our partnership to help industrial recyclers safely remove mercury switches and prevent the release of mercury into the environment. Today, President Trump issued a presidential message to recognize the impact and importance of recycling and the many ways it has advanced American prosperity and the protection of our environment. The history of America Recycles Day is rooted in our nation's long-standing commitment to conservation and stewardship. We are blessed with abundant resources, and we want to maximize the inherent value of those resources for the benefit of the environment and future generations. Americans understand that recycling is an important, everyday action that has long-term impacts on the environment and the economy. In addition to keeping valuable materials out of landfills, recycling supports more than 750,000 jobs and provides $6.7 billion annually in tax revenue. Yet there is an opportunity for us to do even more. It is estimated that Americans throw away roughly $9 billion worth of materials every year. There are a variety of reasons for this, and that's what we're here to address. In some cases, it comes down to public education. Well-intentioned consumers accidentally place recyclable items in the trash and non-recyclable items in the recycling bin. In other cases, it comes down to infrastructure. Our aging U.S. recycling infrastructure has not kept pace with the evolution of new materials and products. And finally, some recent international changes have negatively impacted markets for recyclable products. But with these challenges come great opportunities. We believe that through this summit, we can identify and work towards solutions such as creating a more resilient recycling system capable of withstanding disruptions, upgrading the operation of municipal recycling facilities to recover more material, and developing more competitive manufacturing to convert materials we are currently managing as waste into valuable raw materials. We cannot tackle these challenges alone, which is why we are thrilled to have representatives from nearly every aspect of the materials economy gathered here today. It's not every day that you get Keurig and Starbucks and Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper all in the same room together, and I'm really glad you're all here. The collection of leaders here today is a testament to the importance of solving our recycling challenges. The issues we face are of national significance and will require collective action to successfully address them. Under President Trump, we've made it a priority to engage with stakeholders and the regulated community to work together to address the environmental challenges of our time. Our role at EPA is to help develop best practices, provide the data the public needs to monitor their recycling efforts, and incentivize action through our programs and grants. Let me give you a few examples. We support demand for recovered materials through federal procurement programs, such as the Comprehensive Procurement Guidelines, which provide information on recycled content products and help stimulate demand for these products by federal agencies. Through our WasteWise program, organizations and businesses voluntarily reduce waste and incorporate sustainable materials management into their efforts. Since 1994, over 4,000 organizations have participated in WasteWise, reporting over 234 million tons of prevented or recycled waste. We have an ongoing partnership with the American Chemistry Council and the Sustainable Packaging Coalition through the WRAP Recycling Action Program. This program encourages film plastic collection points and helps build markets for recycled film products. We also strive to recognize and encourage efforts by nonprofits or other organizations. Every year on America Recycles Day, Keep America Beautiful helps people across the country organize their own events to celebrate recycling. This morning, Keep America Beautiful held their 2018 State of Recycling Forum. We look forward to hearing their insights during our conversation this afternoon. Likewise, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation held their 2018 Corporate Citizenship Conference this morning with a focus on how companies can take a holistic approach to investing in local communities. We also look forward to hearing more about their event. Many of you in this room have already made additional pledges to tackle some of the challenges facing our materials management system. We commend you for those commitments, and we look forward to hearing from you as well. During this afternoon's discussion, we want to focus the conversation on 4 key action areas. Over the next year, we hope you will focus your efforts on these 4 areas. Then when we convene next year, and we will be back next year, we can use those 4 areas to help identify and track the progress that we've made. Here are the 4 key areas. 1, education and outreach. 2, infrastructure investment. 3, secondary materials market development. And 4, measurement and data enhancement. A quick word about each. On education and outreach, we need to improve consumer recycling education at a national level. We know the public wants to recycle correctly, but many consumers are confused about what to recycle and how to recycle it. Recycling protocols vary from state to state and even from county to county, so we need to make sure the public has the most accurate and up-to-date information. On number 2, infrastructure investment. The nation's aging recycling infrastructure has not kept pace with our rapidly evolving materials streams. We need to help incentivize new investments that will modernize our aging infrastructure. Number 3, on the secondary materials and markets development. To support infrastructure investment, we also need to develop stronger secondary materials markets. We want to increase the demand for recovered materials through incentives, new product designs, and by maximizing the recovery of materials already available. And finally, on measurement and data enhancement, we must document our progress with clear and reliable measures. We need to help develop common measurements and terminology so we can communicate a consistent message to stakeholders and the public. If we can make progress on all 4 of these fronts, we will decrease the amount of valuable materials going into landfills and increase the amount of material that can be reused here in the U.S. for a variety of functions. This will help the environment, help the economy, and also help local governments. With all of this in mind, many of the participants here today, including EPA, have elected to sign a pledge to work with one another to address these issues. It is now my privilege to unveil the pledge. Barry, would you like to join me? Thank you. I think we should have practiced this. Okay. I'll read it. In recognition of this America Recycles Day, November 15th, 2018, we, the undersigned, pledge to work together to build on our existing efforts to address the challenges facing our nation's recycling system and identify solutions that create a more resilient materials economy and protect the environment. Our signatures indicate the interest and willingness of our organizations to participate in an ongoing dialogue over the next year to identify specific actions that we can take collectively and with our respective organizations to improve the nation's recycling system. I'd like to everybody give applause to the people that and we have no problem making this chart larger and adding other signatures. If anybody else would like to sign it. I want to congratulate and thank all the signatories for making this commitment today. Your resolve to tackle these issues has provided us with a foundation on which to build a new, improved, more resilient recycling system here in the U.S. If there are other organizations that would like to participate, we'd be delighted to include you as we move forward. On the occasion of this summit, we are taking this opportunity to also sign a new memorandum of understanding that supports our nation's industrial recycling. In a moment, I will sign a new MOU with the National Vehicle Mercury Switch Recovery Program. This MOU will renew our partnership to help our nation's industrial recyclers recover steel and other materials from end-of-life vehicles, while at the same time reducing the release of mercury into the environment. Today's MOU will extend the program until 2021, and we hope it will continue long after that. This agreement exemplifies our commitment to recycling and to partnerships that support that goal. It's now my pleasure to sign the MOU, and I would like to invite representatives from the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries, the Aluminum Association, the Automotive Recyclers Association, the Steel Manufacturers Association, and End of Life Vehicle Solutions to join me for a photo. If those individuals could come and stand behind me while I sign the MOU.
Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your leadership and commitment to protecting the environment and public health. I look forward to the ideas and solutions that emerge from today's summit. Thank you very much.
Administrator Wheeler, we're so grateful. Thank you, and thank you for your support and your leadership. That means a great deal. Thank you very much. Thank you as well. Now, before I do the next thing, I just want to make sure if there's an open seat next to you, would you raise your hand? We've got a handful over here, and it's wonderful to have a standing room only meeting. We just want to make sure nobody feels like they have to stand if they didn't want to. So if you'd love a seat, there are several, thank you. There are quite a number, maybe a half a dozen over against the wall. All right, so now I get to introduce Patrick Tallarico, who will guide us through a facilitated discussion. Patrick is a professional facilitator with Inventive Consulting, and he's assisted us with a number of meetings in the past, and he'll help us use our time together most effectively. We have asked him to help get us started, so let me turn it over to Pat to kind of walk us through what we'll do next. Pat.
Great. All right, thank you, Barry. So my job is to get you through our agenda on time and on schedule. So I may speed you up, slow you down, or stop you. And you can help me do my job if you do your job of being brief and direct when you make your comments. All right, so please work with me on that. You can do the math. If each of you takes 2 minutes, we're going to be here till almost 5 o'clock. So anyway, so be brief and direct in your comments. We'd appreciate that. A few things before we get rolling. One is we're going to plow through until 4 o'clock. So if you need to take a break, please feel free to do so. See one of the EPA folks. They can escort you wherever you need to go. There are refreshments in the other room. When you do want to make a comment, please turn your table tent up so that I can see it. And also, when you make a comment, please press the microphone nearest you, the button on the very lower right-hand corner. That will activate the microphone, and speak into the microphone if you can, please. So that's how we're gonna process the comments during the discussion period. Just a reminder, we are seeking your individual input today. We are not going to be pushing you to agree on anything today, so please feel free to share diverse perspectives as you have them. Again, there's no agreement that we're seeking with you today. Let's see. We've organized the discussion along 6 lines today, so we have 6 parts. So the first part, we're going to hear from a couple of our participants, Robin Weiner and David Biederman, to just get just brief overview of some of the issues and ideas that they are seeing from their perspectives. Then we're going to roll through the rest of you in kind of based on who you represent or who you're here to are most closely connected to. So we're going to start with the consumer perspective, and I know the consumer perspective is going to come up a lot in a lot of what you say, but we know that Keep America Beautiful has been focusing on this, so Helen's going to talk to us a little bit more about what they're doing. Then we're going to move on to manufacturers and brands and materials, so that's a lot of you. And so that's everybody who uses materials efficiently, uses recycled materials, uses things in packaging, et cetera, as well as the materials themselves, so steel, aluminum, plastic, et cetera. So we'll move on to that group. Then we'll move on to materials handlers. So this is really the infrastructure folks, the people who collect, transport, and process the recycled materials, recyclable materials. Then we'll move on to policymakers. So I know we have representatives from various levels of government in the room, so we will hear from them. And then we will talk to the influencers, so other people that may be involved who help incentivize some of these things, either through funding, innovation, et cetera. If you don't quite associate with any of those, feel free to chime in, all right? So I don't want that to limit you necessarily. It was really just an organizing function for us to make sure that everybody gets heard. So again, my job is going to try to get input from everybody in the room, so everybody at the table anyway. And so I would ask you, if you make a comment and put your table tent down, if you've got another thought or idea, jot it down for me so that we can come back to you later if we need to do that, all right? So please work with me on that so that everybody gets heard before they leave here today. I know lots of people made a lot of effort to get here, all right? Okay, let's see, I think that's it in terms of the process. So hopefully we'll have time at the end to kind of come back around to see if there's anything else that we missed. So we'll play that by ear. All right. So I think that's it before we get started. Let's go ahead and turn it over to David and Robin. So David, where'd you go? David, you want to start? Okay.
Thank you. On behalf of SWANA, I'd like to thank Acting Administrator Wheeler and the entire EPA staff for convening this summit and for bringing together a diverse array of stakeholders in U.S. recycling systems. SWANA is the only national waste association with members in both the public and private sectors, and with chapters from coast to coast. We are uniquely positioned to contribute to this dialogue, identify solutions, help create jobs, and protect the environment. SWANA believes that the current market disruption caused by China's waste import restrictions imposes unique burdens on local governments, who are often stuck between vocal citizens who demand ever-increasing recycling goals and the practical reality of volatile commodity markets, and that recycling, although an essential public service, isn't free. This EPA-led dialogue creates an opportunity for all of us to work together and develop a more resilient and sustainable recycling system. We should reconsider how recycling programs are funded, which materials should be recycled, how to communicate with the residents and businesses, and what metrics should be used to evaluate local recycling programs. We at SWANA are already engaged in these difficult conversations internally and with local and state governments, other associations and companies, and we welcome EPA's engagement, involvement, and leadership on these very important issues. What we do know is that the outcomes will differ on a local basis. For a variety of reasons, the solutions for Portland, Oregon are likely to be different than the solutions for Portland, Maine. One thing we can all agree on is that contamination in single-stream recycling is a major problem. SWANA wants to move beyond pointing fingers at aspirational or confused citizens and work with other stakeholders, including and especially EPA, to develop effective solutions that truly reduce contamination. They will likely involve increased capital investment by MRF operators, more consideration of end-of-life issues by manufacturers and brand owners, increased and improved recycling-related messaging to residents, a re-evaluation of which materials to recycle and whether curbside is the best way to recycle them, and potentially higher waste and recycling collection costs. Municipalities are grappling with these issues today and are currently looking to SWANA and EPA for guidance. Our 10,000 members are committed to recycling and environmental protection, and SWANA looks forward to working with the agency on these important topics both today and in the future. Recycling is good for the economy and it's good for the environment. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Robin?
Thank you. And I want to thank Acting EPA Administrator Wheeler, Acting Assistant Administrator Breen, and everyone here today from EPA for your leadership in bringing us all together to discuss the challenges and the opportunities facing recycling. ISRI is the trade association representing private for-profit recyclers, including manufacturers, processors, brokers, and industrial consumers of scrap paper, ferrous and non-ferrous metals, plastics, and other recyclable commodities. Recycling in the United States is an important economic engine and job creator. Independent research confirms that the recycling industry supports more than 534,000 well-paying jobs, while generating $117 billion in economic activity and $13 billion in federal, state, and local tax revenue. These numbers tell the story of a strong U.S. recycling industry, but one not without significant challenges in key segments of the supply chain. To understand those challenges, it's important to understand the 4 basic elements of successful recycling. Number 1, recycling is a commodities business driven by demand. If there's no market to utilize recycled materials, it will not move, regardless of the volume collected. Number 2, the value of scrap or recyclables is directly related to its quality. Number 3, recycling is far more than what is placed in the bin. While residential recycling is the most visible to most Americans, it represents less than 30% of the 130 million tons recycled annually. The other 70% comes from commercial and industrial sources and tends to be cleaner with little contamination. And lastly, number 4, recycling is a global business. With more than 800 million metric tons of recyclable materials consumed annually around the world, accounting for 40% of global manufacturing needs. Last year, the U.S. exported 30% of what was processed domestically, valued at $18 billion, to industrial consumers in 145 different countries around the world. I cannot overstate how significant China's surge in scrap commodities demand impacted the global recycling market over the last 20 years. Driven by China's rapid economic growth, lack of domestic scrap supply, and attractive shipping rates. Until this year, 1/3 of U.S. scrap exports, made up mostly of lower grade scrap from curbside programs, went to China. That is why China's import restrictions sent such large tremors throughout the U.S. recycling infrastructure. Through September, U.S. scrap exports to China have dropped 40%, a loss of more than $1.4 billion. The driver? The Chinese government has prioritized domestic recycling growth with a goal of quickly becoming self-sustaining in scrap resources. Now, China did not cause our market disruption, but it did expose a number of weaknesses in U.S. residential recycling, including a collection system that varies by community and is driven by local wishes instead of manufacturing demand, public confusion as to what can be put in the bin, resulting in increased contamination, a municipal recycling infrastructure built to produce lower grades of scrap no longer in high demand, and long-term contracts and policies that treat recyclables as waste material instead of as commodities, thus not adaptable to market fluctuations. The good news is that innovation has and will always play an important role, but that takes time and money. Investments have started, but more is needed. Innovation also comes from public-private partnerships, such as DOE's Remade Institute, which is helping to advance manufacturing through sustainability and recycling, and of which several of us in this room are a part of. Keeping recycling strong requires a continual focus on quality, consumer awareness, market access, and demand growth. Each of us here is actively trying to help our members and businesses cope with these market disruptions. There is no panacea, and there isn't one of us in this room, including ISRI, who can do it alone. I'm therefore grateful to EPA for bringing us together, for providing the platform for all of us to build a more resilient recycling system together. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thanks. I'm sure that we will hear a lot of those themes repeated as we go around the room and hear from others. I would encourage you, as we go into these segmented conversations around the different perspectives, feel free to share any of your successes, challenges, ideas, suggestions for action. Really, everything is on the table for our conversation today, so I encourage you to do that. So I will go ahead and move us to the first of our topics, and I will confess that we wanted to avoid the awkward silence that may come as we move to each topic. So we did ask a couple people to step forward and just serve as conversation starters to get the ball rolling for our conversation. So I will call on a few folks before we open it up to everybody. But first of all, we wanted to talk to Helen and hear a little bit more about Keep America Beautiful and what you're hearing on the consumer side.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would also like to extend my gratitude to the EPA as well as Acting Administrator Wheeler for hosting this incredible gathering. So Keep America Beautiful is the 65-year-old nonprofit organization that believes everyone has a right to live in a clean, green, and beautiful place. And we do that with 3 pillars. 1 is to end littering, 2 is to improve recycling, and 3 is to beautify public spaces. But most importantly, in our mission is that we also believe that every individual has a responsibility around making sure that those things happen in their community. So a lot of what we do is based on behavior change, and we have a model that's based on research and science that we use to encourage people to change their behavior around our 3 pillars. So this morning we held our annual State of Recycling Forum. We do it every year on America Recycles Day, and this year we were very fortunate to partner with Keurig Dr. Pepper on the event. And our focus this morning was really on that piece of consumer education and behavior change. And so I was thrilled to see that this was one of the 4 focus areas for this initiative as well. And we did a couple things this morning. One, we heard from Dr. Wesley Schultz, who studies, he's a social scientist out of California that studies behavior change specifically around recycling and litter, and talked to us about what it is that encourages people to actually change their behavior according to data and science. And then we held quite a large panel, or a focus group, I would say, that was made up of brands, consumers, haulers, processors, and then a couple of social groups, social impact groups. And I would say there were several people who are in this room who were there. And so I guess from my perspective, and I think from what I've heard from others, the most interesting piece of this morning's panel were the consumers. So we hired an agency who does focus groups to get us a wide array of recyclers. So everything from somebody who essentially never has recycled, will never recycle, and is absolutely actually against recycling. And then the very avid recycler who tries to recycle everything, and everything in between. And so what was really fascinating, I think, from many aspects, is a lot of what we heard from Dr. Schultz came up from the consumers as well. So one of the biggest pieces was the issue of convenience. And that came up over and over and over again, the issue of convenience. One panelist said, my apartment's too small and I can't have 2 separate bins in my apartment. We heard a lot of, it's just too much work. I don't want to do it. It's just too much work. We also heard a lot of, it's very confusing. Even the avid recycler in the group was like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know when it gets rinsed. I don't know where it goes. So a lot of, it's too confusing. The second point that came up a lot is this idea of, you need to justify it to me. You need to tell me why I have to do this. What does it mean to my community? What does it mean to my family? And what does it mean to those people around me that I care about? And they said, yeah, we care about the environment, but that's not really the main reason. That's not really it for us. And so that was this whole idea of justification around the immediate community that they live in, I think was also a large point. The third point, and I'll stop there, it goes on and on and on, and actually we recorded it, and we're gonna have it available to everyone, and I would really encourage you all to watch it because it's fascinating information. But the third point I think that was brought up a lot, that we talked about, was this issue of social pressure, and how much does social pressure impact whether or not a person recycles. And that was really fascinating because we talked a little bit about how actually social pressure, it can be good, but then on the other hand, it actually can be too much, and it can go too far, which I thought was really interesting. And some of the younger panelists said, well, yeah, if a friend of mine recycled, I would definitely do it. And then another one said, well, I have friends that post things on social media about recycling, and they want me to think that they're doing all this great stuff, but actually, when it comes to really directly influencing people, they really don't do it. So it was a fascinating morning, and any of those of you who were there this morning, I would encourage you to chime in if you have some additional things that I forgot. But I would be happy to share the link to the video when we get it up, because it was a really interesting morning.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other folks in the room that feel like they have kind of their finger on the pulse of that consumer perspective or do a lot of work at the consumer level? I want to chime in.
So hello, everybody.
Yeah, please introduce yourself and where you're from when you speak.
Yes, certainly. So my name is Stephen Secra, and I work with the Procter & Gamble Company. I'm very privileged to be here representing them and representing our consumers. We're a very large consumer company, as you may know. We have the privilege of serving 5 billion consumers each and every day globally. And our consumers tell us one thing, and that is they look for us to give them sustainable products and packages. While they're buying our products because they want them to perform, they look to us to design it properly for proper recovery and proper recycling. And it's with that consumer in mind that we've set a vision, and along our vision we have vision for climate, water, waste. But you can't just have a vision, you have to have goals. And along our pathway, we have some very specific goals, such as to reduce the amount of materials that we use by 20%. And along that pathway, we've reduced 14% already. We've made another goal to double our amount of PCR, post-consumer recycled. And along that pathway, we're making great progress. This past year, we just reported using 38,000 metric tons of PCR, on our way to 52,000. What I'm telling you there is the demand is real. We need the material, and it has value. Now, along this pathway, we also believe strongly in innovation. Not just innovation in terms of technology. One technology I'll tell you about answers the question on quality, and that's a technology called PureCycle, where we've helped improve the quality of recycled polypropylene. And we're happy to see a pilot plant that has started last week in Ohio. We hope to see that scale up, and an opportunity to bring these things to bear in terms of scale up is innovation in finances and innovation in terms of best practices. So I can look to my left here and I look at the Recycling Partnership, I look at the Closed Loop Fund, and both of those bring some innovation in finances in terms of catalytic capital. Whether it's grants or investments in this space, these types of innovation in finance will help scale up these new improvements in terms of quality and recovery systems and infrastructure that's needed. We also need to innovate with the consumer. We've tried that. We need to continue to do this and learn more in this space. One of the ways we've tried is by using beach plastic. Answers the question of why. Because plastic has value. We want it back. We don't want it on the beach. We should not have to do beach cleanups. But what we did with a Head & Shoulders bottle was we took the iconic white bottle, we used plastic collected from beaches, and it became gray. But we sold it that way and consumers bought it. We didn't do that to celebrate or to greenwash. We did that to help send a message that material has value, that we want it back. But as I'm here from Procter & Gamble, many other brand companies would tell you the same message. Material has value, we'd like it back. And one way to bring it back is through collaboration. So I think that's the final message here, is we need to collaborate together across the entire value chain, from the starting material side to the converters, to the brand owners, through the retailers, and the post-consumer recovery, collection, and reclamation systems, along with good policy. And when we answer each of those factors across the supply chain, we can all benefit. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Steve. So let's go ahead on and talk to some of the other manufacturers, brands, materials. Nina, do you want to go next?
Sure. And I would also like to thank the EPA and thank everyone who's here. Really, I want to touch on 3 areas. One of the initiatives that our members are very excited about is our How to Recycle label, which was started as an on-pack label to inform consumers at the point of discard whether or not they can recycle this package. And as packaging continues to get more and more complicated, it's impossible to ask a consumer to make that decision between one type of package and another because they just look alike and they're never going to know. So looking at that label and telling them, yes, recycle this, or no, don't recycle this, or take this off before you recycle it, is a way to do that. But the unintended consequence was it also helped us educate the brands and the retailers, because as they were applying for labels and not getting the labels that they wanted to get, they were getting information on how to make that package better. And so the collaboration through both the brands, and I really have to call out the retailers here, both Target and Walmart, looking at both of you, you were the first to really jump on board and apply this to thousands and thousands of products, which helped to hit that tipping point. So expansion of that label, I think, is critical. From an infrastructure perspective, we need to think about what is the future of packaging. Today, we're really focused on what we have today and what we can recycle, but if we want to get ahead and we want to lead, we need to work with those companies that are creating the future of packaging and understand how to create that infrastructure for tomorrow's package, be ahead of the game instead of behind the game. And in order to do that, we have to embrace new technology. So this is really the market development part, picking up on what Steve said about PureCycle and other types of new technologies that will create building blocks for new materials, and think more broadly rather than just that narrow recycling focus, but think, how do we create these new building blocks and how does the United States lead? And I think the EPA is perfectly positioned to help us do that and really welcome the support and intervention here. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nina. Donna, is it Donna? Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Donna Harmon with the American Forest and Paper Association. Delighted to be here. Also want to add my thanks and appreciation to EPA and all of the leaders around this table who've come together. I think this group has maybe not been assembled quite like this in quite a while, so it's very refreshing. I know some of us meet separately, and it's great to see everybody together. Let me just start with a bit about what we've done. Stephen mentioned the importance of goals and measurement in the paper industry. We're one of the most recycled materials by weight, more than any other material. And we've gotten there, I think, from some of the things that have already been mentioned. Strong market demand for products. That market pull has really helped create the infrastructure. It's helped create the economics. It's helped create the financing. As we've been talking here just in these last few minutes, that's how we've gotten here. That's kind of the past. And now looking to the future. A few years ago, our association set a goal of achieving a 70% recycling or recovery rate, paper recovery rate. We have exceeded 63% for the last 9 years, and we're headed to 70% by 2020, and currently at 65.8%. But I think without these goals, these voluntary goals that our industry has set and many other industries have set, that we wouldn't be where we are today. So as other materials are looking for what can they do to expand recycling, I think don't lose sight of the importance of the goals, and the measurement piece that is in the 4 elements is critically important. The other thing, just looking around the table, we've been in partnerships with many of the different organizations here, and are pleased to still be in partnerships with some of you and looking forward to others. But I think that the partnerships are a way that we can augment and amplify what each of us are doing. And in public education, that's probably one of the most critical as we're trying to understand the role that millennials are playing in the future of recycling. We face a lot of the issues that have been identified here from the commercial recycling stream, where we get high quality, large quantity of material, and now with the advent of e-commerce and the continual rise in boxes arriving on your doorstep, residential recycling of those boxes isn't as high as commercial recycling. So back to some of the points that have been made, clear, consistent education, public education about how to recycle, where to recycle, when to recycle, clean and dry, in the bin. We're doing some infographics, some videos, and some other things to really help put that message out there, and are just delighted to have the partnerships with so many of you in the room who will help that message get to the ultimate consumer.
Great, thank you. And I think as we go through this process over the next year, we're going to be diving into a lot of these details a lot more and really looking at some of the examples that you've mentioned and trying to figure out what works and why. So that's great. Keep them coming. So Patty, I think you had your table tent up, and then we'll go down here.
Thanks. My name is Patty Long. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Plastics Industry Association. Adding my thanks for the forum and also for the great participation. So the Plastics Industry Association represents the entire value chain for plastics, everything from resins and materials through machinery, brand owners, and processors. We believe that recycling traditional waste to energy and chemical are critical in keeping plastics out of the natural environment. But just to pick up on what Steve said, plastic is not waste. It is valuable, and I think that is the most critical point for the consumer to understand. Our association works on every aspect of recycling, from design for recycling and collection to consumer education and the development of material end markets. But there are three key areas that we feel like we're most qualified to lead in. One is advancing sustainable manufacturing. So we provide a lot of tools, best practices to our members in many different formats to both educate them and incentivize them to do sustainable manufacturing. We're also doing a lot of work on end market development, most specifically with flexible film, and doing some trials with the National Center for Asphalt Technology and others to help build out those end markets that are so critical. And then lastly, we have put together a coalition, and a lot of people in the room are part of this. And the coalition is to advance federal legislation for infrastructure development for recycling. So SWANA and ISRI and several others are working on this. We have legislation that's been drafted, and we're hoping to introduce it in 2019. Very basic things to, advance retrofitting of MRFs and to, speed up permitting and a lot of the other things that people have talked about. So we do think there is a federal role here.
Great.
So thank you very much.
Excellent. Yeah, next.
Hi, I'm Tom Gibson with the American Iron and Steel Institute. I'm going to tag team here a bit with Phil Bell of the Steel Manufacturers Association. Together, we represent both the integrated and electric arc furnace segments of the industry. Both use scrap in making steel. But I did want to thank Andrew Acting Administrator Wheeler, for convening this meeting. Thank him for the remarks about Don Clay. I'm probably a poster child for Don Clay's mentorship. He gave me my first shot in DC, worked with him here as a junior political appointee and in the private sector. He's always looking for ways to bring ideas from OSW and from RCRA into Superfund to improve Superfund. Superfund wasn't a real popular program in the 90s. And one of the best ideas that Don had was the idea that maybe we could recycle entire contaminated waste sites. Not necessarily the Superfund sites that developed into the Brownfields program we know today. Why not recycle whole sites? So thanks, Don, for that and for your influence on my career. The steel industry can probably bring some lessons to bear here. We have a mature recycling system. There is demand for steel. We use a lot of it. We bring a lot of it out of the market. 3/4 of all the steel, the consumer steel that goes to homes in the packaging market, gets recycled. Virtually 100% of automobiles are recycled. More than 90% of appliances in your homes get recycled. So we have a success rate. But we've also learned some lessons on things like the importance of the integrity of the waste stream, which is why the MOU that we signed today is so important. And we really value the partnership and the collaboration with EPA over the years in looking for ways, non-regulatory ways, to get the environmental endpoint that EPA wants to make sure we're not releasing mercury into the environment, and also to get the quality of scrap that we need in order to meet our customers' demands. We also have some downstream opportunities because we generate what we call co-products, different kinds of slags out of electric arc furnaces and integrated steel makers that have mechanical properties that are excellent for reuse downstream. And again, working with EPA in the states, finding ways to remove barriers to reuse of those products is something that we've gotten pretty good at in our industry, and maybe there's some lessons there, but it's something where we need to turn to the regulators occasionally and say, look, you need to look at this material more carefully. It does not have waste-like characteristics. It can be reused beneficially and substituted for use of a virgin material. The impact on the economy, Robin already mentioned, is enormous. It's in the billions of dollars of economic activity just generated by the steel waste stream recycling a portion of the industry. The savings to the economy in terms of energy use is enormous. If we made all our steel in the United States with virgin materials, we save the equivalent amount of energy to light up about 1/5 of all the houses in the United States to reduce electricity use. So we are a success story. We have challenges. The regulatory environment's always changing, and we really need the partnership with the regulators to identify our problems and talk through solutions that are mutually beneficial and find some opportunities. So, Phil?
I just want to echo Tom's comments and also thank Acting Administrator Wheeler for his hard work. One of the things about the domestic steel industry is we have had a long-standing great relationship with the EPA, which allows us to pursue solution-focused, common-sense solutions to our scrap problem. I'll just close by also saying that in the steel industry, the U.S. scrap processing supply chain is kind of the poster child for what other countries want to aspire to. At the SMA, we represent electric arc furnace steel producers, so our raw material is recycled ferrous scrap. And we consistently field calls from various industry groups around the world, understanding how our supply stream works, not only for ferrous scrap, but as Tom alluded to, the co-products that we create. So thank you again, Acting Administrator Wheeler, and I think this is a great day. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Heidi, I think you were next, and then
Yes.
Antonio.
Thank you very much. And again, I'll echo the appreciation from the aluminum industry to Administrator Wheeler and the staff of the EPA on pulling this really terrific forum together. The Aluminum Association represents the plants and people of the United States, and we also represent the entire value chain of aluminum. There is just a really terrific good news story. I mean, the United States recycles more aluminum today than ever before, and increasingly rely on recycled aluminum to support U.S. production of aluminum products. But the problem is that the United States still throws away way too much aluminum packaging material every year. More than $800 million worth of aluminum cans alone are landfilled. And this is truly tragic. It's a problem that is largely due to lack of infrastructure, public education, and the appropriate policies on recycling. And I think this gets to this issue of the value of the material that people have been talking about today. Not only is a precious material and aluminum lost in this case, but also tremendous economic, social, and environmental benefits for the country. And really, for these materials, all of these materials, if they can be recovered, we just see tremendous economic benefit for the country going forward. So while aluminum is one of the most recycled materials on the planet, remarkably, 75% of all aluminum in use today has been recycled. So much more can be done, and we stand ready to partner with all of those around the table and with the EPA on this initiative.
Great. Thank you. And I appreciate the brevity in terms of your comments so far. They've been great. So please keep that up and even make them faster. That would be great. So, all right, Antonio, I think you were going to say something? No? Yes? Did you?
Well, we want to thank Administrator Wheeler for having us here. We are working hard in Puerto Rico to try to develop markets. We believe that this is important to us. We know that also in the States, as well as Puerto Rico, we believe that it's important that we can be better. We have been depending for exporting commodity to China and other places, and we believe that it's time to have our own markets and change those commodity and with added value and sell products. That could be in our specifications and quality controls that we had locally. And we know that Puerto Rico can be also helpful as a hub in the Caribbean and South America with the United States, and we can put the United States globally as a market and creating a lot of jobs. I think also that we need to have to look for markets for not so easy materials in terms of Puerto Rico. Any help that we can have from your experience in terms of markets we want to make more asphalt road in the island for the tires instead of exporting to where we send to China, then to Africa and India. But we believe that we can do better in our own country in roads and better projects. Also, we believe that in terms of, we have some problem with the ash from the carbon, from the electricity. We have a lot of problems in the island dealing with that. We have a product that is our max, but I think that we can develop an exchange of materials that we can share with other states, other places that are willing to use those materials. Because probably I think that is not useful, would be useful to other one and be a material that can be used. That's something for us in Puerto Rico. If someone have an alternative, we are willing to receive your comments and recommendations.
Great.
And willing to work together.
Okay.
Next step.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks. All right, other manufacturers, brands, other folks in that category, the Micheros folks. Yes, on the end.
Thank you. I'm Ryan Guthrie with the Coca-Cola Company, and I want to echo the thanks to EPA for this convening. We're hearing a lot of themes, I think, develop, and most of them, all of them are right on point. I just want to, per instructions, I'll be very brief, but I just want to briefly talk about a program that we're working on and how we view this space and some things that we think we can work on collectively in this room and individually as a company. For more than 130 years, Coca-Cola has been making a wide variety of products and a wide variety of packages. And we know that packaging waste is a problem. It's a global problem. And we know our packages are contributing to that problem. And so we care about the world's oceans. We care about the world's waterways. We care about the communities in which we operate. And to that end, we've made a pretty large global commitment. We call it a world without waste. Our goal is to reuse and recycle 100% of the packaging that we put in the marketplace, to the point of measurable goals. We're going to measure this goal by 2030. We plan on being 100% recycled in all our packages. It's part of our strategy as a company to grow with conscience, not growth at all costs, but just grow as conscious as a company with a conscience. To become a total beverage company. Real quickly, I just want to talk about 3 ways that we're going to do this because I think they track really well with the action steps that this group has laid out. First, we're going to make a better bottle by increasing the use of recycled and renewable content in that bottle. We're going to partner with industry and with our customer and other organizations to ensure that our communities have the infrastructure that they need for recycling, curbside recycling, public space recycling. We kind of look at it as infrastructure 2.0. What's the modern waste stream infrastructure look like? And we want to be part of that. And education as well. There, education programs in order to help people understand what to recycle, how to recycle it, where to recycle it. So again, common themes that I think are coming up, which is why this convening is so important. We know there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and we're committed to working market by market to figure out what will work best. And then just really quickly, I'll close with, there's kind of two ways we approach this as a company. There's things that we can do alone. We have a lot of marketing dollars, and we're willing and going to put our money where our mouth is to use our marketing dollars to help educate people on recycling. At the same time, we know no individual entity or company in this room can do it alone, and we need to work together with government, with local communities, with NGOs, and even with our competitors, many of which are in the room today, to solve this problem. And we're committed to taking that two-pronged approach, doing our part, but working as part of the collective to do it. And I think that, again, we're hearing that today as a roadmap, and we just feel like that's the roadmap for success. It's good for our planet, it's good for our communities, and frankly, it's good for business. And so we're committed to it as Coca-Cola.
Great, thank you. Steve.
Thank you. I'd like to, on behalf of the American Chemistry Council, add our voice of thanks to Acting Administrator Wheeler and the entire team at EPA for your generosity and work in holding this event and for your enthusiasm around America Recycles Day. ACC works in several different ways in this space. We are privileged to support some great organizations, Keep America Beautiful, the Recycling Partnership, and others that are doing really great on the ground work, and it's our great honor to do that. Other times we partner. We've partnered with APR on a rigid plastic container recycling program. We've partnered with EPA and appreciate the memorandum of understanding, thank you, with the flexible film program and the wrap work, and that's really helping to remove a product from a waste stream where it doesn't fit well. Thank you for that. It's a great step forward. And sometimes we lead, and some of the work that we're really excited about coming up is implementing our goals to recycle, reuse, or recover 100% of plastic packaging by 2040. We are taking the lead of some fantastic brand commitments, retail commitments to recycle, recapture, and reuse, and that was our inspiration for setting our goals, and we look forward to working with EPA and other stakeholders to get there. Another area where we are excited about the future and intend to apply our technology leadership is around material innovation and regeneration technologies to make sure that plastic that currently isn't recycled or can't be recycled is captured for its value. And plastic of all kinds, mechanically recycled or not, has value, and we want to make sure that we keep those materials in a circular system to the degree we can. I think the messages going forward for EPA are you have established a strong foundation with sustainable materials management and helping us remember that recycling fits within a broader sustainability framework, and that's very important for all sorts of resource management, so thank you for that. That's a good foundation to build on. Secondly, innovation is happening quickly, whether it's in material innovation or financing mechanisms or business models. This is an exciting time to have this discussion, and I encourage flexibility and creativity as we think about the models that will take us into the future. May not be the models that have brought us to where we are today. So that's where I think the future may be going for all of us. And finally, looking around the table, we are inspired by the range of organizations and the positive, constructive position that is being taken here. Nobody wants materials to be wasted. Nobody wants an environment contaminated by plastic or paper or aluminum or glass. We want to all do better, and so let's find ways to capture the great energy of the moment and celebrate today as America Recycles Day. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next down here. Yeah. It flashes green and then goes red. unless it doesn't work.
We'll try this one. Hi, everyone. I'm Lee Anderson, wearing two hats today. I'm here on behalf of General Mills, a food company, and I'm also chair of AmeriPen, the American Institute for Packaging and the Environment, as a volunteer. So I'll say a few quick words on both. So from General Mills' perspective, obviously most of you know us as cereal producers, but produce a lot of other foods. But in that capacity as a cereal producer, we're really proud that over 60% of our plastic packaging is already widely recyclable through the cereal film. Thank you. And one of the ways that we educate consumers about that is through the How to Recycle label. We've been a participant for many years. We're also working on some exciting new ways to educate consumers about the recyclability of that film. You can put it in with your bags that you return to the store, like so many other plastic films. The other thing I was going to mention on behalf of AmeriPen is something that I haven't heard come up here, is the importance of state public policy to incentivize and increase recycling, which is what AmeriPen works on. We've been advocating for, on behalf of industry, have been advocating for policies like pay-as-you-throw or tiered pricing, and we see a lot of opportunity in the upcoming state legislative sessions to continue to advocate those policies. We think that recycling and the recycling challenges, or the challenges to the recycling system, will be key topics in 2019. We'll continue to advocate on that behalf.
Great, thank you. Anybody else from the materials manufacturers brand side? Yeah, Zach.
Hi, Zach Fries with Walmart. Just want to thank EPA for convening this great group of stakeholders today. I feel like this is the true value chain together, and I think in this room we've got a lot of opportunity to make these positive changes happen. And I think everyone really supports the recycling at Walmart, and we've done a lot of great work internally to make a lot of our pledges come true, and we've got more work to do. And I think a couple things I want to build on from a customer perspective is, as a retailer, where we can really play a significant role, and we have goals to do that, are around the design of recyclable packaging. And so we have a goal of 100% recyclable packaging for our own private brands by 2025. And we're also encouraging national brands to do that. We think making that design happen is going to be challenging, but it's something that we have a target to do. And on the flip side of that, we think educating the consumer on how to recycle is also very important. So to Nina's point earlier, making it easy for customers is a very important step. And quite frankly, it's not easy enough right now. And we have to make it easier as an industry, and we have to design the right way, and we have to tell the customer how to recycle in the right way. And so Walmart is really taking a big step towards that direction in our design. And then we're also committed to roll out the How to Recycle label on all of our products. So with those two things, we really hope to bring the customer along, help make it easy, and encourage more responsible material management. Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, how about the materials handlers? The folks that are responsible for collection, transport, processing. Daryl.
Thank you. I'm Daryl Smith, President and CEO of the National Waste and Recyclers Association. I represent the private sector of the guys that pick up the garbage and take it to be recycled. I'm not going to repeat what my colleagues David and Robin very eloquently said about we need to educate the consumer, and we need more infrastructure, et cetera. But there is one thing that I want to make sure gets said at the meeting. We're kind of out there on the front lines, and we are the ones that are probably the most visibly picking up recycled materials and trying to find a market for them. I've heard a lot of the larger companies and entities in the room talk about making materials that are recyclable. Just because something is recyclable doesn't mean it has a market to be recycled. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's very commendable to make these products that can be recycled, but maybe try to work with the people that wind up with this stuff to try to find a market for it, and see if you can't be helpful to us in that regard, because especially with the China issue, we've got stuff piling up in warehouses around the country, and we're desperate to find markets for some of these things. So if you can be helpful with your power and connections, we would appreciate it.
Great, thanks. Brent.
Sure. Thank you. On behalf of Waste Management, Brent Bell, thanks for having us today, for the EPA, for hosting this event. Waste Management is the largest residential recycler in the U.S. We've invested about $1 billion in the recycling infrastructure, and we also happen to be the 7th largest exporter in the U.S., primarily going to China. That's all changed over the last year or so. Oversupply situation that we're seeing today has caused commodity prices to significantly decline. As a matter of fact, nearly 60% of the material that we collect on curbside programs has 0 to a negative value at some point in 2018. And most of that is contamination related. 25% of our customers' bins that we collect average 25% contamination rate. What does this mean for the recycling industry, the processor side today? We have a higher processing cost with much lower commodity values. That puts a lot of strain on investments for this infrastructure. But this is also a time, Waste Management and some other companies are investing heavily in new technology as well as education programs. They're going to educate consumers on recycling the right materials, paper, cardboard, bottles and cans. We also need sustainable end markets domestically for these materials that we recycle every day. And so we encourage, and it's good to have this group here to encourage them to use recycled content in their products so we can send more of our products domestically, creating jobs and not have to ship as much material in the export markets today. And the finally is our customers. They love to recycle. They want to recycle. They want to make sure. I think it's great that we all come together today as an industry and provide sustainable solutions that work both economical and an environmental perspective.
Great. Penny, did you want to chime in?
Thank you. I'm Penny Gross. I'm representing the National Association of Counties today, but I am a supervisor in Fairfax County, Virginia, just across the river. For those of you who are unfamiliar with NACO, we represent the nation's 3,069 counties. I think it's about 97% of all the people who live in this nation. Our counties differ widely in landmass and in population, likewise in their solid waste and recycling responsibilities. And China's decision to restrict recyclables have really squeezed our counties. Instead of breaking even, now our counties are taking a loss. In Fairfax County in FY18, our cost per ton for single stream recycling increased 7,800%. In Fairfax, we think we can handle that. A lot of smaller counties would not be able to handle that kind of an increase. In some cases, a year ago, paper got $75 a ton. Today is at $0. We're speculating internally that this may lead to illegal dumping because dead market recyclables will go into local landfills. Landfills have a limited lifespan. And contamination of recycled materials lessens the value but increases the cost for counties. For counties, it's really cost. We know we have to clean it up. It's our responsibility, but it is a significant cost. And waste streams have gotten very complex. There's a diversity in many of our counties across the country. There's a diversity in socio-demographics, in language, in culture, in housing types, and all that requires a targeted content of message. I've heard a lot of people talk around here about the various items that I would also repeat, but it goes to when we're trying to educate the public about recycling, we need to have a simple message from many voices. That would probably go a long way to helping get the message out to folks. We've got changing markets. We've got building infrastructure we need to build infrastructure that can adapt. In Fairfax County, we have the access to 4 or 5 MRFs. Many local smaller counties do not have that opportunity. We also need to look at new collection approaches. I've heard that mentioned before. I think that is probably one of the things we need to look at from a county perspective is the way we're doing it now the right way? What do we need to do to change? And we need to re-examine customer roles and needs. The conventional wisdom in collection may no longer apply. I am delighted to hear the comments of everyone around. I would love to have additional conversations at the National Association County level, perhaps at a future conference, to talk to folks like Walmart and Coca-Cola and so forth, those sort of everyday brands that our constituents and your customers know so very, very well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Any other folks from the processing side? Bridget, and then over there. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Bridget Anderson, Department of Sanitation, New York City, and I really appreciate being invited to provide a local perspective. I agree with many of the comments that have been made. We are the municipal side of the front lines of collection. There are similarities and differences to the private sector and public sector collection. I wanted to bring up a couple of points. One is that, ultimately, recycling is resource extraction for manufacturing. And so there are many, many analogies to mining and other resource extraction. And being on the front lines, the resource is something that is gathered every day. To give a sense of scale, New York City residents generate 12,000 tons a day of waste. That includes trash and recycling. That's just the residential side, not even the commercial sector. The spigot doesn't turn off. We have to collect it every single day, day in, day out. We can't start and stop programs. It creates chaos. We are eager partners in trying to extract value from our waste stream. We have policies that require us to do so. But the challenge is that we're not nimble. We have a solid waste management plan that we operate under. It took 5 years to negotiate. It went into place in 2006. It required infrastructure investments that we are still completing today, 12 years later. It took us a decade, but we have long-term contracts and state-of-the-art recycling facilities in New York City that have kept us a little more resilient than maybe other counties and cities across the country in terms of the China situation. But we are, as reflected in the prior comment, we are recipients of the waste that's being generated. And so if the materials in the waste stream keep changing, we're not that nimble, we're not quick to change, even though we would like to be. And our residents, the information that they receive is very sticky. So education is important, re-education is very hard. And so changing programs is just a challenge that we all have to face, because we have a lot of people who moved to New York City and they are operating under the assumptions that they learned when they were in 5th grade in Michigan or in California. And even though we have mailers, we have social media, we educate, they still operate. It was very sticky education that happened originally. So just not to discount how hard it is to actually educate appropriately, to make changes. And so we have to be cognizant of the time it takes, and that we can't be starting and stopping and changing. We're not as nimble as maybe the private sector is. So keep that in mind as we're trying to figure out how our portion of the process can and can't change as quickly as maybe we'd like. We are very much supportive of infrastructure investment. We were able to because of our long-term contract, and we also committed in New York City to the fact that recycling costs money. So we invest a lot of taxpayer dollars to keep our program running, to invest in infrastructure. Not all counties and cities have that ability. It was very unpopular politically, but now we're seeing the benefits because we have more resilient contracts than maybe other places did. And so we would certainly recommend that message about the fact that recycling does cost money, and we're a utility. We also wear many hats. Today, instead of our sanitation trucks collecting, recycling, and trash and composting, they have plows on the front and they're plowing the snow. I just got an email, it's snowing about an inch an hour right now in New York City. So we are eager partners, but it's just to underscore we're not nimble. And so we just have to keep that in mind as we think about how to evolve. And there's been a long process of developing, support to develop mandatory diversion rates for cities, for counties, for states. It means that we can't just focus on quality, we have to focus on quantity if we're gonna actually meet our legally binding mandates. So that is another area where it does a disservice for us to move backwards and to collect less. We need to figure out how to be successful with what we're collecting, and know that there's a time process for us on the front lines to shift. So if there's new markets, new materials coming on the market, I've spoken with some of the folks in this room about We're very supportive of innovation, you know, whole life cycle analysis of the benefits of new products. But for us to be able to change our back end to handle that, we need time and we need advanced warning, because we have to go through a political process. We have to go through an infrastructure, capital investment process, an infrastructure process. Obviously, private sector money is going to greatly help us in that way. Federal leadership will also help to emphasize the importance of infrastructure development. I guess that was the point I wanted to make, is that we are eager partners, but we're not nimble. So we just have to keep that in mind as we're walking through this process.
Great. I'm going to go to Will and then go to Will.
Thank you, Pat. Certainly will echo our appreciation to Acting Administrator Wheeler and to the staff for the incredible amount of work they did to pull this together. I believe this day will be remembered as a long time as a turning point in our building of our infrastructure for recycling. Southeast Recycling Development Council is made up of local and state governments, collectors, public and private, processors, brands, and other trade associations all coming together to promote sustainable recycling systems in the Southeast. That recycling is beneficial for the environment is probably an uncontested proposition now, but what is becoming very obvious is that it is increasingly impacting and driving our economy in this country. Unfortunately, we've had recent media stories point out that there are problems in some programs, some threaten with shutdown, but any inference taken that discounts the importance that we have in our nation's economy is in error. As before China took their actions, the majority of the material collected in our programs remains in the United States, feeding our manufacturing base. Indeed, in the Southeast alone, there are 360 facilities currently operating on recycled material collected in these programs under discussion. They're producing consumer goods. They're operating today and they'll be operating tomorrow, regardless of any actions taken in China. The impacts of China's actions have been painful. We've got depressed prices and backlogged shipments. But we look back, we have recovered from crashes before, and we can expect to recover again. We're seeing several new investments in manufacturing capacity already that have been announced, and that will be strengthening the demand for our material. Our local governments are at the headwaters of the recycling value chain, and they're operating with fixed budgets. They're ill-equipped to navigate these volatile prices. We need an intervention to provide stability for municipal collection programs, and we have to approach the contamination problem. It's a burden on domestic demand as well as it was and is for our export markets. We need to work together with EPA to build a national message to encourage participation in recycling and how to do it correctly. And we need assistance in our infrastructure to be efficient in getting our material from collection to market, because we are competing with virgin materials. We've got to be cost competitive with what we get to market. They're not going to pay extraordinary prices just because it's recycled. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Will. And so you guys are so good at really stealthily moving me to the next topic of policymakers, which is great. I'm going to go back to David, see what else you want to add.
Sure, I agree with so many of the statements that are made, and I appreciated the representative from New York City and Fairfax County. Keep in mind, those are large, relatively affluent jurisdictions, and there are thousands of cities and thousands of counties that simply don't have the resources to even engage in the types of programs that Fairfax and New York City have. But the central point that I want to make is one that we haven't touched on very much, but was one of the 4 areas that EPA mentioned at the beginning, which was measurement. Okay, how we measure recycling is something that we should be keeping in mind as we move forward on all these other areas around education and infrastructure. We have to really consider whether every ton that we divert is the same. Is diverting a ton of food waste just as good or better or worse than diverting a ton of concrete or a ton of glass? The idea, at least in the industry, is that maybe we should stop thinking about chasing tons, and we should be going after the right tons for purposes that are slightly broader than just preserving landfill capacity. And so I want to make sure that as we have these conversations that we start thinking more about, are there other methodologies that we should be considering? SWANA spent 2 years internally evaluating the fact that maybe weight isn't the only way to measure stuff. It's a tough conversation. I see several people nodding. It's a difficult conversation to have internally in our organization, let alone with strong environmental advocates. But I think it's a necessary one. And so I want to make sure we don't lose that point. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. So did you come up with an answer? All right. Pete.
Pete Keller, Republic Services. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to echo others' appreciation for EPA's leadership for convening the group. I'll answer David's question. Yeah, we shouldn't just chase weight. I mean, there needs to be an LCA or an environmental attribute layered into that. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we've been out in the marketplace saying the business of recycling is broken. That said, we're long on recycling. We bought the largest independent recycling company in the U.S. last year. We continue to make investment in technology. We continue to build greenfield sites in the U.S. Probably invested $250 million in infrastructure within the last 5 years. So, it's an important part of what we do, and it's certainly an important part of what we all do collectively. But when I say the business is broken, we have 123 processing agreements with municipalities. We have 1,113 collection agreements with municipalities. The processing book of business is a piece of cake. We're underway converting that to a processing fee-based model. In fact, largely complete converting that book of business. But when you consider the material that we collect and the material that we ultimately process and market, the vast majority of that material is derived through those collection agreements. Historically, as a company and as an industry, and Robin alluded to long-term contracts, we sign long-term contracts. I think our average municipal book is 7 years in length. Historically, we collect that material at the curb and we own it. Right? So we enter into contracts, we generally get paid a monthly rate or a yardage rate. We generally get some sort of escalator over time related to CPI or some other index. But that recyclable material that we collect, again, the vast majority of the volume that we manage is locked in. Changing commodity markets, changing material streams, additional program recyclables. That's the part of our business that's broken. We've come to the realization very painfully that we can't continue to live that way. So what have we done? We've actually gone and had eyeball conversations with every customer face to face. We've communicated some of the challenges in the marketplace. Ultimately, we'd like to see some sort of variable pricing applied to those collection agreements. That adds durability, it creates incentives. We believe it influences better behavior in the marketplace. We could spend a whole afternoon talking about pay-as-you-throw programs and the like and what that's done. But I think we're all aware of the complexities of contamination and complexities of the marketplace and some of the challenges that we all face. We've invested heavily in education, and we're crafting agreements in ways that we want to share more value with our customers. But ultimately, we're really trying to influence the behavior to clean up those material streams. The last thing, and I don't want to be a buzzkill here, get late in the afternoon, but the last thing I would say is materials get lighter, and they will, and they should. The business of processing material is volume-based. The economics of recycling are weight-based. So as materials get lighter in the future, the cost to process those materials will become more expensive. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Interesting. Okay, anybody else from the materials handling perspective or the policymakers perspective? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Annie White, and I'm with DC's Department of Public Works. Just for reference, we're a city of about 700,000 here. About a little over a year ago, we announced that we're introducing some materials that many communities don't accept, a range of food service packaging, to-go containers, paper and plastic cups and plates. And for the first time in about 3 years, introduced a pretty robust outreach and education campaign that, and I'm kind of pleased to come back and report that we just got our results back of comparing the two waste sorts of, we had about a 10% increase in tonnage from the residential sector and an 8 percentage point, or about a 20% reduction in contamination from about 27% to 19%, which we know is still high, and we'll get it down lower, but we're proud of that progress in 1 year. But I wanted to say a couple of, when we're talking about education, that campaign was built on a lot of publicly available resources and tested messages, and we appreciate that. We're lean and on the ground, and we really having that hub of content and information that we can trust and it's thoughtful is useful so that we can be effective. And the introduction of new materials was really helped by the Food Service Packaging Institute and having very good information, a toolkit for the MRFs, information for the communities, bale compositions, information on contamination, a toolkit on education, and how to best communicate that. So I think there are opportunities to add materials, but it is helpful when there is that thoughtful information and research to make it easier, and support to make that easier for communities. And then our residents also, the second point, also want to see us to hit a high recycling rate and for the materials that we recycle to be truly recycled and strong beneficial use. Currently, I know this is happening across the country, but glass is an issue, and we're in an area, in a region that we collect enough glass in this region to support all sorts of processing and in markets. But that's really hard for a city on its own, and for a region to come up with those solutions about how to stimulate that secondary market growth. So I look forward to continue to work with you all about how we make that happen. We're also in a little bit different position than New York, of where working with private MRFs and short-term contracts. So it gives you a little bit of a sense of where we are. So thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Danny.
Red is honored.
That's on.
Yep.
You're on.
There you go.
All right, I'm on now. Okay, thank you. Danya Rodriguez, Executive Director of ASWAMO. And for those of you who do not know us, we're the Association of State and Territorial Solid Waste Management Officials, all 50 states, 5 territories, and District of Columbia. This has been an amazing day. And Helen, I too have been using the word fascinating of this morning's conversation. I really thought it was fascinating. This is an important topic, and it's one that we spent some time with EPA senior leadership last month. And this was just one of the topics, because I'm sure you guys understand states just don't work on materials management recycling, even though solid waste management officials is in our title. That's what ASWAMO was founded on 44 years ago. And one of the things I think we need to think about, I like what you said about New York having to be, I think, nimble, or how we evolve with some of these programs. Same thing for states. And it is going to be regionalized. And I think it's something we need to think about some more. We have a materials management subcommittee at ASWAMO, and I think we're looking at the success that Southeast has had. And I think the Northeast is looking at that now, one of our counterparts with NUMOA and NERC. And so I think that's something we can think about, working together with EPA and all the partners here around the table, and thinking about all of us here are consumers. Just don't think there's other consumers. We're all consumers here, and how we help educate each other. Thank you.
Robin, and then we'll move on to the next round.
I just wanted to add something quickly and just make sure that one of the items that was mentioned by the acting administrator earlier in terms of goals or action areas was not lost, which is the issue of common definitions and common terminology, and how important that is, because even around this room, as I've been listening to everyone, we refer to sometimes the recyclables as waste, sometimes as a valuable resource. We also have different definitions of what is recycling, of what does it mean for something to be recyclable. So there are all these disconnects, and we're the ones who are, most knowledgeable about recycling, and we can't come to any sort of common definition. So I think this is a role that EPA can certainly play, because I don't believe there is a federal definition anywhere for a lot of these terms. And so that might help us with the next thing, which is harmonizing messaging also, because a lot of us in this room, and especially the brands and others, are spending a lot of money on messaging about recycling and the importance of recycling and how to do it right, et cetera. And the problem is, I think sometimes we're stepping out on each other. And we heard that actually this morning at the wonderful event that KAB did with the confusion about, is it really happening? I'm hearing different things. So to the extent we can harmonize and get around some uniform messaging, I think that would just be incredibly valuable, and we would appreciate that effort very much.
Great.
Just one quick thing and I know Helen said that this morning's event was recorded and it's gonna be posted, and it goes back to the measurement and messaging. An interesting piece was folks not understanding like what's in it for them, and some folks thinking that you all are making a lot of money on this when you guys are here saying that you're losing money. And so that was a really big piece, as well as the glass folks were saying, well, we save 5 million tons of glass. What does that equate to? I mean, you think about when somebody says like, oh, well, then how many football fields does that fill? Like that kind of thing. So you're saving this much. So like the metric ton piece, people don't understand that. And I think even us here are like, well, really, how much is that? So.
Really quickly, then we're moving on.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, sorry. Several years ago, actually, when we partnered with KAB on a state of recycling briefing on the Hill, and the whole reason why it was the first state of recycling briefing done, and the whole reason we did it was actually because there was messaging that was going out about recycling is collapsing. And it's like, no. There's segments where there are problems, but there's also the problem with, again, that kind of mixed message getting out there is it does deter, because the residents and consumers don't know where this is going, and they just assume it's collapsing, so why bother? So again, just want to emphasize that.
Great. All right, let's move on to our influencers. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak if they want to. Yeah, our influencers. So we've got Bridget, you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bridget Croak. I'm with Closed Loop Partners. We, through our corporate investors and the broader investment community that we co-invest with, we represent about $400 million worth of investment capital going into this space. And we think that there's trillions of dollars in investment capital that could come into this sector that's going into kind of more linear models today. And a lot of that capital is on the sideline for a variety of reasons. One is that investors don't have a clear sense of the availability of good feedstock that is coming to bear. And so that's where I think additional kind of public capital and other kinds of education, things like that support clean feedstock, so that investors understand that there's kind of an ongoing supply of feedstock that can actually get back into a supply chain is really critical. So that's something I think where the public sector can play a significant role. The second area, which is more on the private side, is that a lot of these investors aren't going to make investments. And again, they will make significant investments because this is a supply chain, and we need to be using the terminology of these kind of circular supply chains as opposed to waste that goes somewhere and doesn't get back into the manufacturing supply chain. So I think that's a really helpful kind of framing to drive significantly more capital into the space. But we also need the private sector and markets to be making long-term offtake agreements for the material and committing in a variety of ways, whether it's a letter of intent or actual purchase agreements, to that material so that investment can happen. And we've made some investments in some of the technology and processing and markets that we've kind of catalyzed that investment from the private sector, but we couldn't have done that unless the private sector came in with those long-term offtake agreements. So I think those are just a couple things to consider. Also, good policy and tax incentives, other incentives to drive market development, because everything comes from the market side of things. And those kinds of incentives can drive back to consumers, because to the point we heard about this valuable material, the consumers don't see that value depending on where they put that.
Great. Stephanie or Keith? Yeah.
So as was mentioned earlier, we're in the midst of our annual corporate citizenship conference.
Can you
So
just introduce yourself?
Yep. So I'm Stephanie Potter, and I oversee the Sustainability and Circular Economy program within the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Corporate Citizenship Center, where we cover a number of issues, sustainability and circular economy being one. But this conference that we're in now that was referenced is the sort of convening to discuss the intersection of issues such as disaster preparedness to sustainability and health and wellness to economic empowerment. And so the theme is Better Together, all about progressing impact through collaboration. So I see no better example of this theme than the initiative that I'm sort of here to represent and work most closely with many of you on, which is the Beyond 34 initiative, all about improving recycling rates above the current 34% national average. So we launched this initiative in Orlando in 2017 in collaboration with the Orlando Chamber of Commerce, City of Orlando, Target, Republic Services, Dow Chemical, Walgreens Boots Alliance, Walmart Foundation. And it's really trying to demonstrate success within a region by convening local stakeholders across the value chain, the recycling value chain, and then developing a blueprint that can be shared with other regions so that in aggregate, the national rate is improving through place-based action. So together with technical advisor RRS last year, we in Orlando analyzed existing data sets and produced a gap analysis of intervention opportunities, calculated an economic opportunity of 84 million in recaptured commodity value and landfill diversion, and job creation opportunities of up to 4,000 through manufacturing, collection, and processing activities. We developed 14 business cases that we have now, in collaboration with groups like Coca-Cola, Dow, Walgreens Boots, TRP, and longer-term closed loop will be rolling out that address various intervention types and over various time periods. And then, you know, one of the learnings in Orlando is that there is a role that a backbone convener, such as the role that we're playing, can do to kind of catalyze collective impact and really kickstart collective action. So we will continue to stay involved in Orlando together with local management to collect back some of the insights and the data that's coming from some of the projects launched and those that will be launched. And then we will also look to expand this initiative in a new region to develop proof points in a second place. And then alongside that, really kind of put together this shelf of resources that can be utilized by other stakeholders that can pick this up and implement similar types of models locally. So that's what we're excited to be turning to next year, and appreciate all the support of everyone in this room around that and other things we're working on.
Great. All right, Keith, and then we'll go to that side of the room.
I'm Keith Harrison. I'm the CEO of the Recycling Partnership, and I get to add my thanks to EPA for having us here, but I also get to say thanks for the boost. You might not remember it, but 5 years ago next month, you gave a $75,000 grant to convene a meeting. Many of us were in the room then, and it was the point of that meeting was to say enough. We have got to build a platform that allows public and private entities to come together and actually make change on the local level. The Recycling Partnership was born there, and in that time, we've turned your $75,000 grant into more than $32 million of catalyzed investments around recycling. That was a good job. Well done. So that means that we're working with more than 900 communities across the country, and partnership is part of our name for a reason. We have more than 40 different funding partners, collaborators, competitors, who join in a space that say, we can make change. We also work well with others. That's one of our core values, is to partner with many of the organizations that are in this group, because this problem is too big to solve alone. So here's something that I've not heard said yet today. While recycling feels universal, the truth is only half of Americans can recycle at home as easily as they can throw something away. If they have to haul their recycling somewhere, will they? Now, those that do recycle, how much are we getting of their stuff? It's about half. So we're at half of a half. That means 20 million tons of materials getting disposed every year. What does 20 million tons mean? That came up earlier. Can we give a visual to that? Well, if we were able to recover that, that'd be the same as taking enough cars off the road to more than circle the globe. that's a big impact that we could make that change immediately and help communities across the country. So, we just yesterday released a new study, a poll of 2,000 people in this country about what do they feel about recycling. And you know what came out of it? The New York Post picked it up and ran an article yesterday that green is the new sexy. That you might want to adjust your dating profile because if it's 76% of Americans said it was a turnoff if they see people not recycling. So, but at the same point, we know that we're only getting half of what we could. So we've got a little bit of an opportunity here to recover that. And this is where EPA comes in. Your convening 5 years ago has resulted in action. This convening today will result in other action. And I love the 4 areas of activity that you've highlighted. We can make measurable change between now and next year in those 4 areas. In fact, we have to. Communities cannot bear the cost burden of recycling alone. They look to the companies, to governments, and to organizations like many of those in the room to help them, and help them we must. And we must do it quickly, because if we do not, they will not survive this economic blip, this blip for recycling. It will turn into something much more dire, and we will have a bigger job on our hands. So EPA, thanks again for this chance to take this even further, and if you have any further investment advice, I'm all ears.
All right, we have 2 more people ready to go, and then that's probably going to have to be our last. And but this is not the end of this conversation. This is going to continue. So this has been a great start. So let me go to the corner and then the other corner.
Great. So we've heard a lot of wonderful things today, a lot of important information for all of us to think about as we go away. Thanks to the EPA for having us here, and also to the staff that'll be following up on a lot of these items afterwards. That's important. I think the one thing that we are still missing that is absolutely critical to our success is a shared vision of what the future looks like and why we want to get there. Not just how we get there. We've talked a lot about how we get there, but why we want to get there. I think there might even be a start of it right here, right? Recycling, protecting the environment, growing the economy. We've got to come up with a shared vision around recycling that really inspires each and every one of our companies and each and every one of our organizations and governments around the country and individual citizens to really take part in this process if we want it to be successful. We can't just keep doing the same educational programs and the same things that we've been doing for the last 15 years and expect a different result. We've got to find something a little more inspirational. I think we need to start with that shared vision. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes.
So I didn't plan on being the last commenter, but it may be apropos. I'm Chuck Chadovitz with the U.S. Chamber, and wanted to also echo my appreciation to EPA and to all of you for a very important discussion. And I was thinking, you know, what comes next? And I know that all of you were thinking that as well. And so I just wanted to offer something up as our small contribution to that. How can the Chamber serve as a platform for the broader private sector and other stakeholders to address policy barriers to action? We would be pleased to participate in that discussion and look forward to working with all of you.
Great. Thank you. So Barry, I will turn it back to you for some closing thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat, and thank you, everyone. I have pages and pages of notes, and I think virtually everybody here from the EPA does. We've got a lot of advice mining to do, thanks to your investment of your time today. Let me see if I can tell you a few of the things I heard. I won't tell you who said them, but I know who said them because I made footnotes for myself. We thought it would work out, and I think indeed it did, that many of the ideas organized themselves into 4 categories: information, infrastructure, markets for recycled material, and metrics. On information is sticky. At the same time, it's important to have publicly available toolkits, and many consumers need to understand we have to justify to them why recycling is good. At the same time, for example, while paper was $75 a ton, now it's $0. A number of companies are making marketing dollars available to help, but they can't do it alone. All those things and more go into education. Infrastructure. Only half of Americans can recycle at home as easily as they can throw something away. And yet the goalposts keep moving. Packaging gets more and more complicated. Infrastructure is important, as well as state policy. Maybe the solutions are regionalized. Local governments have fixed budgets, and we need an intervention. A number of people mentioned flexible film as an area on which progress can be made. On markets for recycled material. Material has value, we'd like it back. Aluminum is a precious material, and we're throwing $800 million of it away every year. We need to realize we're substituting reuse for virgin material. And on metrics, a number of us identified the importance of goals and measurements and a common understanding, a common definition. We can think of it as using the terminology of the supply chain, which would potentially free up a considerable amount of private investment dollars. We shouldn't just chase weight. This part of the market is broken, and there's a role for EPA to serve to enable us to get to a shared vision using data sets and measures. That and so much more are some of the wise advice that comes out of your investment in this time together. So where are we going with this? Obviously, we're going to take as much as we can from what you've shared today, and we hope that together, among ourselves and with others who are interested in joining, over the next several months, we can develop a national action plan. Will it be perfect? No. But do we have a chance to just wait and do nothing? Absolutely not. At the same time, doing nothing is not an option because everybody signed that sheet that says you're going to do something. So you're already committed, as are we. We all watched Administrator Wheeler sign for the EPA, and we watched you sign it, and we took a picture. So we got it. We got you, and we're so delighted. We wouldn't have it any other way. As I said, our plan over the next several months is to develop an action plan. We'll try to be as inclusive as we can. If you know others who would like to join, please let us know. We'd love to invite them in, and we'd love to celebrate America Recycles Day 2019 with a mark of how far we've come on that action plan. So, Pat, thank you to you, and thank you to each of you for being here. We actually, although we have to end the meeting now, we have the room for a while. So I hope people will feel free to find one another, find EPA, we'll find you, and good travels back, and thank you for being here today.